Came home 3 days early and I didn't tell a single soul. My flight from Dallas got canceled Tuesday night, then rebooked, then canceled again. By Wednesday morning, I'd been sitting in that airport for almost 16 hours, and when the gate agent finally handed me a boarding pass for a direct flight home, I nearly cried right there at the counter. I was 58 years old. I'd been away for 11 days handling a property dispute with my late brother's estate in Fort Worth, and all I wanted was my own bed, my wife's cooking, and maybe 2 uninterrupted days where nobody needed anything from me. I didn't call ahead. My wife Helen had been dealing with her knee after a minor procedure the week before, and I knew she'd stay up worrying if I told her I was on my way. I figured I'd just show up, walk through the back door the way I always do, and surprise her. Maybe pick up flowers at the airport shop. I remember thinking that on the drive home from Nashville International, I parked at the long-term lot thinking this was going to be a good moment. One of those quiet, ordinary good moments that don't get talked about much but that hold a marriage together. I pulled into the driveway at just after 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. There were 2 cars I didn't recognize parked along the curb in front of my house. One was a silver BMW, fairly new. The other was a white Escalade with a Tennessee vanity plate I'd never seen before. I sat in my car for a moment. I wasn't alarmed, not yet. I thought maybe Helen had friends over, or that our son Marcus and his wife Brianna had come to help out while I was gone. Marcus and Brianna had moved into a rental about 20 minutes away the previous spring, and Brianna's parents, Gerald and Loretta, lived out in Brentwood. A nice area, new money. The kind of neighborhood where every other house has a 3-car garage and a Ring doorbell that's been tested exactly once. I grabbed my bag from the trunk and went around to the back, the way I always do. I keep a key under the flagstone by the garden hose. Old habit. The back door opened into the mudroom, and through the mudroom into the kitchen, and the first thing I heard was Helen. She wasn't talking. She was crying. Not loud. Not the kind of crying that fills a room. It was quiet. The kind you do when you're trying to make sure nobody hears you. Short, controlled exhales, a kind of breathlessness. I know the sound of my wife crying in private. I've heard it twice in 31 years, and both times were the worst days of our lives. Hearing it in my own kitchen on a Thursday afternoon in October made my stomach drop straight through the floor. I set my bag down without a sound. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see her sitting at the small table near the window, the one where she does her crosswords every morning. She had a tissue in her hand, and she was turned slightly away from the door, looking out at the backyard. She was wearing the same house dress she'd had on when I left 11 days ago, the faded blue one with the buttons. Her hair wasn't done. Her slippers were on her feet. From the living room, not 20 feet away, I could hear laughter. Big, relaxed, confident laughter. A man's voice I recognized. My son Marcus. And then a woman's high trill that was definitely Brianna, and then a deeper laugh I placed immediately as Gerald, her father. I could hear the television on behind them, some sports channel, the volume up, comfortable. I could smell food that had been recently cooked. Not Helen's cooking, something different, heavier. I stood in the mudroom doorway and I looked at my wife crying by herself in her own kitchen while our son laughed in the next room, and I felt something shift in me. I did not announce myself. Not yet. I walked over to Helen and put my hand on her shoulder, and she startled so hard she knocked the tissue box off the table. She turned around and her face did that thing. Faces do when you're trying to compose yourself too fast. Everything rearranges, but the eyes don't quite catch up. "Victor," she said, "you're home." "I'm home," I said. I crouched down so we were at the same level and I looked at her directly. "What's going on?" She shook her head. "It's nothing. I'm just tired. The knee's been." "Helen." She pressed her lips together. "They've been here since Monday," she said. "Marcus and Brianna and her parents. They said they were coming to help while you were gone, but She stopped. She looked toward the living room, then back at me. "They've been using the master bedroom. They said I could have the guest room with the twin bed because of my knee, that it would be easier to manage, and I didn't want to cause a scene, Victor. I didn't want Marcus upset." I was quiet for a moment. I needed a second. "They put you in the guest room," I said. "It's only been a few days." "In our house." "Victor, stay here," I said. I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room. Marcus was on my couch, feet up on the ottoman I'd bought Helen for her birthday 3 years ago. Brianna was next to him with a glass of something. Gerald was in my armchair, the leather one I'd had reupholstered 2 years ago after the cat destroyed the original, and Loretta was on the love seat. There was a takeout spread on the coffee table, containers from someplace I'd never ordered from, The ceiling fan was running on the high setting, which I never use because it makes a vibration sound that bothers me. They looked up when I walked in. Marcus's smile started automatically and then changed when he read my face. "Dad, we thought you were back Saturday." "I'm back now," I said. Gerald stood up. He's a tall man, Gerald, well-dressed. The kind of person who fills a room by standing in it. He extended his hand. "Victor, we've been holding down the fort. Helen's been a little under the weather, so we wanted to make sure." "You're in my chair," I said. He paused. His hand was still out. "Please sit down," I said to the room, and something in my voice made everyone sit. I stayed standing. "Helen tells me you've been here since Monday." "We wanted to be helpful," Brianna said. She has a way of delivering everything in a tone that sounds patient, like she's explaining something to a child. "Your wife needed assistance and we didn't want her alone." "My wife," I said, "is in the kitchen crying." "Alone." Nobody answered that. "Whose cars are out front?" I said. "Dad, we can talk about this." Marcus started. "Whose cars," I said, "were in front of my house?" "Mine," Gerald said. He'd sat down, but he hadn't relaxed. "And Marcus and Brianna's. We can move them if—" "You can do that," I said. I looked at Marcus. "My son is 33. He's a good-looking man, takes after his mother around the eyes." He had a look on his face that I recognized. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that knows it's been caught but hasn't figured out its position yet. "How long were you planning to stay?" I asked him. "We were just helping, Dad. In our bedroom." He glanced at Brianna. "In our bedroom." He glanced at Brianna. She gave him the kind of micro-nod that married couples develop without realizing it, the one that means, "I'll handle the explanation." "The master has more space," Brianna said. "And the ensuite bathroom was easier with everything we brought. The guest room is honestly very comfortable, and with Helen's mobility being limited, it made sense for her to be closer to the kitchen and—" "My wife is sleeping in a twin bed in her own house," I said, "because you decided the master bedroom was more convenient for you." Loretta, who had not spoken, looked down at her hands. That told me something. "I'd like everyone out of the master suite," I said. "I'd like all of this cleared off my coffee table. And then I'd like you and I to have a conversation." I was looking at Marcus. Gerald straightened up in the chair he'd returned to. "Victor, I think you may be reading the situation a bit, Gerald," I said. "I like you fine. I've always liked you. But this is my home, and I'm going to ask you to let me have this conversation with my son." There was a moment where I wasn't sure which way it was going to go. Gerald is the kind of man who doesn't hear the word no easily. He's built a small real estate business from nothing, which I respect, and he's used to being the largest presence in a room. But I've been running a construction and development company for 26 years, and I've sat across from men who've tried to renegotiate contracts mid-build, men who've told me their attorney would be in touch, men who've done every version of this posturing there is to do. I just waited. Gerald nodded finally. "Of course," he said. "It took them about 40 minutes to clear out the master and gather their things. Helen came and stood with me in the hallway, and I kept my arm around her the whole time. She kept trying to apologize, and I kept telling her she had nothing to apologize for." When Brianna's parents finally said their goodbyes and took their cars from out front, I sat down with Marcus and Brianna at the kitchen table. Helen made coffee because she said she needed something to do with her hands. I asked Marcus directly, what was the plan here? He was quiet for a long moment. Brianna answered before he could. "We've been thinking about a lot of things," she said. "About the future. About what makes sense for everyone." "What things?" I said. What came out of the next hour was this. Gerald had been talking to Marcus for months about the development company, about what would happen to it eventually, about the property my company owns, which includes 2 commercial lots in Murfreesboro and a warehouse building we've been leasing since 2019. Gerald had apparently assessed the approximate value of those assets. He hadn't been shy about asking questions over the years, and I hadn't thought much of it, and had formed some opinions about what should happen to them. The plan, as it emerged in pieces, was that Marcus and Brianna would transition into my house. Helen and I were, in their vision, getting older, and the house was large, and there was an attached mother-in-law suite off the back that Gerald had apparently suggested would be more manageable for us as we aged. Gerald would become a silent partner in the business, providing capital for expansion, and Marcus would take on more operational control. It was, on its face, a reasonable-sounding arrangement, which is exactly what made it dangerous. "You put your mother in a twin bed," I said, "to start warming her up to the idea of living in her own addition." Marcus flinched. It wasn't like that. Tell me what it was like. He couldn't. I sat with that for a moment, then I said, I want to tell you both something, and I need you to hear me, not just wait for me to finish. They both looked at me. Marcus, I said, I've worked for 31 years. Everything I have, this house, the properties, the business, I built it. Your mother stood next to me through every year of it. She worked the front office until you were in middle school. She kept the books when we couldn't afford an accountant. What we have belongs to both of us, and it is not on the table. It's not a topic for discussion with your father-in-law. It's not a negotiation. I wasn't trying to. I'm not finished. I kept my voice level. I'm going to tell you something your grandfather told me when I was about your age, and I thought I had things figured out. He said, inherited ground doesn't feed you. Only the ground you break yourself does. I believed him then, and I believe him now. And I've tried to raise you to believe it too. Somewhere that message got lost, and I take some of the responsibility for that, because I made things comfortable for you and maybe I should have made them instructive. Brianna was very still. Here's what I want, I said. I want you to go home, both of you. I want you to sit with what happened this week, not defensively, really sit with it. And then I want you to think seriously about what you're building. Not what you're inheriting, what you're building. They left that evening. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone except Helen and my attorney over in Franklin, was that I'd already handled the question of the business and the properties 18 months earlier. It started after Gerald's first casual comment at Thanksgiving, the year before. He'd mentioned, in that offhand way he has, that it would be smart for Marcus to get more involved in the business before I retired. At the time I'd nodded and changed the subject. But that night, lying in bed, I thought about it longer than I should have had to. And what I thought was, I've seen this pattern before. Not in my own family, but in the families of men I've done business with. The gradual repositioning. The concern dressed up as helpfulness. The slow transfer of gravity. I called my attorney the following Monday. What we set up was a revocable trust that holds all the significant assets, the house, the 2 commercial lots, the warehouse lease rights, and the business interests. Helen is the co-trustee. The terms of the trust specify that distribution of assets follows demonstrated contribution, not lineage. There's a clause that's specific about what contribution means. It means showing up. It means work. There is also a beneficiary provision that names my niece Carla. Carla is 31. She's the daughter of my sister who passed 5 years ago, and she's been working for my company since she graduated from MTSU with a business degree. She started in accounts receivable. She is now my operations manager. She has never once in 4 years asked me what any of this will be worth someday. She has only ever asked me what needs to be done today. I called Carla after Marcus and Brianna left and told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment and then said, Uncle Victor, I'm so sorry. Are you and Aunt Helen okay? I told her we were. Do you need me to come over? I told her I appreciated that and we'd catch up at the office on Monday. What came next took about 3 weeks to fully surface. Gerald called me the following Tuesday, very measured, very professional, to suggest that perhaps we could all sit down together with a neutral facilitator, his word, to discuss the business transition. I told him there was nothing to facilitate. He mentioned that Marcus had some concerns about his long-term security. I said I understood that and that Marcus was welcome to talk to me directly. Marcus did call. We had a long conversation, and it was hard, and it was honest. He'd been told things by his father-in-law that weren't accurate about where the business was headed and what my plans were. Gerald had been filling in blanks I'd never left intentionally blank, and Marcus had let those fill-ins become assumptions. I don't fully blame Marcus for that. He's 33 and his father-in-law is persuasive and confident, and he loves his wife. But I also didn't soften what I needed to say. You have to decide, I told him, whether you're going to build your life or manage mine. Those are 2 different things, and you can't do both. I told him the trust existed. I did not tell him the full details. I told him the business had a succession plan that protected Helen and the employees, and that if he wanted to be part of that future, the path was contribution, same as it was for everyone else. He asked me if I was cutting him out. I said no. I said I was asking him to earn his place, same as I'd had to. I told him I loved him and I was proud of who he could become, but that was different from being proud of who he currently was, and he needed to know the difference. He didn't speak to me for almost 2 weeks after that conversation. Gerald made one more move. He had his attorney send me a letter, very formal, very legal sounding. suggesting that as a potential future minority business partner, he had some interest in reviewing the company financials. My attorney sent back 2 sentences. There is no partnership current or contemplated, and there will be no further communication on this matter outside of formal legal channels. Gerald did not write again. Brianna called Helen once. I don't know exactly what was said. Helen told me afterward that Brianna had cried and that she believed Brianna was genuinely sorry and that she'd ask what she could do. Helen told her to be a good wife to Marcus and a good daughter-in-law to us, and that was what the family needed. Helen has more grace than I do. Always has. Here's the part I keep coming back to when I think about all of it. About a month after everything settled, on a Saturday morning, I was on the garage going through some boxes for my brother's estate. I'd finally gotten them shipped from Fort Worth. And Marcus came by. He didn't call ahead. He just showed up in the driveway the way I used to show up at my father's house, just to be there. He helped me go through the boxes. We didn't talk about any of it. We talked about my brother, whose name was Eugene, and about things I hadn't thought about in decades. The summer we painted houses together when I was 17. The car he had that never ran right, the way he used to laugh. We talked for almost 4 hours. Before Marcus left, he stood in the driveway for a moment like he was working something out. I was wrong, he said. About a lot of things. I let someone else do my thinking for me, and I let myself believe things because they were convenient to believe. And I let Mom get treated. He stopped. He shook his head. I'm sorry, Dad. I put my hand on his shoulder. I know you are, I said. Now go home to your wife and figure out what you two are going to build. Not what you're going to get. What you're going to build. Call me when you want to talk about how. He nodded. He got in his car. I stood in the driveway watching him back out, and I thought about my father and his father, and I thought about Carla in my office on Monday morning opening her laptop and diving in without anyone asking her to, and I thought about Helen in the kitchen making her crossword coffee, finally in her own bedroom, in her own bed, in the house that belongs to both of us. Some things you build, some things you hold on to. The difference between the two is everything. I've thought about that Thursday afternoon more times than I can count. Not with anger anymore, the anger burned off a long time ago, but with a kind of clarity that only comes after something forces you to see your own life plainly. What happened in my house that week wasn't really about a bedroom, or whose car was parked out front, or even about the business. It was about a slow erosion that I hadn't been watching carefully enough. That's the part I sit with, not what Marcus did or what Gerald tried to engineer, but the years before that, the small moments where I chose comfort over honesty, where I let things slide because confrontation felt like it would cost too much. Every time I made things easy when I should have made them instructive, I was writing a check I didn't know I'd have to cash later. That's just how it works. Not as punishment, just as consequence. Choices accumulate. They always do. Helen cried alone in that kitchen because the people who loved her had gotten comfortable taking her for granted. I include myself in that. I was 11 days away, focused on my brother's estate, and I hadn't checked in the way I should have. She was too gracious to call me and say our son had moved his in-laws into our master bedroom. That's her nature. But grace in the person you love doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to pay attention. What I keep returning to, though, is Carla. She never asked for a single thing. She just showed up, did the work, asked what was needed, and went home. I didn't plan to make her the center of my succession when I first hired her. That happened because she earned it, consistently without ever seeming to calculate that she was earning it. That's the thing about integrity, it doesn't announce itself. It just builds up over time, quietly, and when it finally matters, it's the only thing in the room that holds weight. Marcus is going to be all right. I believe that. The conversation we had going through his Uncle Eugene's boxes, that was real. That was my son without the performance, without the positioning, just a man sitting with his father working through something that needed to be worked through. He has good in him. He got turned around by someone confident and persuasive who made a certain kind of thinking feel reasonable. It happens. What matters is whether you find your way back. What I'd tell anyone going through something like this is simple. The people around you will rise or fall to the level you hold for them. Not the level you hope for. The level you actually hold and enforce, with your actions and your decisions and what you refuse to accept. That night I walked back into my house was the night I stopped letting comfort be the reason I didn't say what needed to be said. Helen deserved that from me a long time before it happened. Some things you build, some things you hold on to, And knowing the difference, that's the whole game.